safety of air travel in the United States in general, but especially in connection to the country's nationwide shortage of air traffic controllers. Which is why you have a lot of people bringing it up in response to the Trump administration not hiring new staff, but instead firing hundreds of FAA employees. And with that, you have the president of the union representing 11,000 FAA and DoD employees saying in a statement that the probationary workers began receiving emails late Friday notifying them of their termination, with him claiming that the employees were fired, quote, without cause nor based on performance or conduct. Or with him also noting that the emails were from an exec order Microsoft email address, not a government email address. And as far as how many employees have been let go, well, after prompting from former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, you had Sean Duffy responding late last night saying fewer than 400 FAA employees have been fired, with him also claiming there that 0 air traffic controllers and critical safety personnel were let go. But notably, with that, not everyone seems to be in agreement regarding who exactly qualifies as critical safety personnel. Or you had The Guardian, for example, reporting that those terminated included maintenance mechanics, aeronautical information specialists, environmental protection specialists, aviation safety assistants, and management administration personnel. With also a former FAA air traffic controller claiming that agency personnel who were terminated maintain every piece of equipment that keeps flying safe, from the radars to the instrument landing system to ATC automation. And so with that, the Associated Press reportedly reached out to the Department of Transportation about the firing of personnel hired for FAA radar, landing, and navigational aid maintenance. But then a DOT official initially responding by claiming the agency retained employees who perform critical safety functions, but then they backtracked by saying that they would actually have to look into whether these workers were considered to handle critical safety functions. And then on top of that, other fired employees reportedly included those who were working on an early warning radar system for Hawaii to detect incoming cruise missiles. It's a program partly funded by the Department of Defense, and it's just one of the FAA's National Airspace System Defense programs. And so with that, you have one of the fired employees telling the AP that their work is about protecting national security and adding, "I'm scared to death and the American public should be scared too." With them also saying, "I don't think they even knew what NDP does. They just thought, oh no, big deal, he just works for the FAA." And so then connected to all that, you have the National Air Traffic Controllers Association saying in a statement yesterday that it was analyzing the effect of reported federal employee terminations on aviation safety, the national airspace system, and our members. And so we're gonna have to wait to see what they find and ultimately if and what kind of impact this all has on safety. But in the meantime, I will say that the current conversation around aviation safety, it goes beyond the firings. We're going back to that exchange between Sean Duffy and Pete Buttigieg. You also had Duffy accusing his predecessor of failing to address the air traffic controller shortage and update the country's air traffic control system, with Duffy claiming in less than 4 weeks we have already begun the process and are engaging the smartest minds in the entire world. And with that, I'll say, one, it's generally true that the Biden administration was unable to remedy the shortage or modernize the country's outdated air traffic control system. But two, notably, of course, neither did the previous Trump administration. But these are issues that go back at least a decade, if not more, and it's also not exactly clear how the current Trump administration plans to deal with it either. But what we know so far has raised questions, and that's because whatever the plan is, it seems like the world's richest man will have a lot to say in the matter. Because earlier this month, you had Duffy saying that Elon Musk's Doge team would plug in to help upgrade our aviation system. And then, just this weekend, you had him saying that employees from Elon Musk's company SpaceX, they'd be visiting the Air Traffic Control System Command Center in Virginia to, quote, get a first-hand look at the current system, learn what air traffic controllers like and dislike about their current tools, and envision how we can make a new, better, modern, and safer system. But this notably, as you have some saying, it's not clear what kind of expertise SpaceX, which is a company specializing in rocket launches, has in how the air traffic control system works. And in fact, right, Elon Musk, he has repeatedly clashed with the FAA in the past over its regulation of SpaceX, calling on its previous leader to resign and threatening to sue the agency after it proposed fining the company. And this is, of course, many believe that Musk has had a hand in the mass firings not only at the FAA, but across the entire federal government. I mean, for example, another one of the hardest hit agencies, the Department of Health and Human Services, which includes the FDA, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, and the National Institutes of Health, to name a few. And with all of that, the thousands of employees that have been let go reportedly include not only scientists and researchers, but also administrators overseeing grant proposals, analysts figuring out new ways to cut healthcare costs, and computer specialists trying to update government systems for tracking health information. With also a top FDA official actually resigning this week, citing the indiscriminate firing of 89 staff members from the agency's food program. And of course, in general, the loss of so many employees from the nation's health agencies has a lot of people worried about what it could mean for everything from fighting disease to keeping food safe, right? And there are similar worries about potential unseen consequences at other agencies as well. I mean, the Department of Energy, for example, they fired about 2,000 employees, including workers that the Trump administration apparently didn't realize were responsible for managing the country's nuclear weapons, right? Specifically, we're talking about the Trump administration letting go of up to 350 employees of the National Nuclear Security Administration late Thursday, with some even reportedly losing access to their email before they had learned that they were fired, and they found out because they tried to enter their offices on Friday, but they were locked out. But then the head of a group by the name of the Arms Control Association commenting, the Doge people are coming in with absolutely no knowledge of what these departments are responsible for. They don't seem to realize that it's actually the Department of Nuclear Weapons more than it is the Department of Energy. Though they did eventually realize it, and by late Friday night, the agency's acting director issued a memo rescinding the firings for all but 28 of those hundreds of fired staff members. So one of the big problems there is that some of those fired employees, they couldn't be reached after they were fired. And that is some were reportedly reconsidering whether to actually return to work given the uncertainty created by Doge. And so now we're in this situation where the administration is reportedly scrambling to convince those that they can get in touch with that they should come back. And in fact, they are reportedly not the only employees who were fired by mistake. Something that I will say is not all that surprising when you consider the scale of everything. We're only talking about a few of the affected agencies here, but this is everywhere. 400 at the Department of Homeland Security, 1,000 at the Department of Veteran Affairs, and more than 3,000 people at the U.S. Forest Service. Also soon, you're looking at potentially thousands of IRS employees smack dab in the middle of tax season, and overall, the Trump administration hasn't said how many workers have been fired. Though there, what we do know is that the government employed more than 200,000 probationary workers as of last year, and those probationary workers, they're the ones being fired right now. They're generally people who have been on the job less than a year. Though, I will say besides that, the purges have also swept up people with years of service who had recently been transferred between agencies, as well as us seeing military veterans and people with disabilities employed through a program that sped through their hiring but put them on 2 years probation getting hit. And with all that, as usual, we get to the question that we get to in most of the Trump stories: is this even legal? And as usual, the answer is maybe, possibly even, probably not. Because while it's true that probationary employees are generally easier to fire and they have fewer protections, it's not like they don't have any rights at all. And so to cover their bases, the termination letters that people are getting are all reportedly making the same claim: you're getting fired because of poor job performance. But there, notably according to the Washington Post, many of those fired had just received positive reviews or had not worked in the government long enough to actually receive even a single rating. I mean, some employees even said that everything seemed rushed and there were a lot of errors. Like, for example, the termination letters at education, they listed the wrong job or the wrong start date. Also, a legal help number offered in a notice sent to a small business administration employee led to a voicemail for an apartment building, not a lawyer. And some firing letters seemed copy-pasted from the form and left out the name of the agency where employees worked. And so with all that there, according to an attorney at a law firm specializing in litigation by federal employees, firing employees en masse with the same claim of poor performance is illegal. With them adding there, it can't be true. They're clearly not articulating this on an individual basis, which is what makes it so suspect. However, a spokesperson for the Office of Personnel Management repeated something that the office has said before. The probationary period is a continuation of the job application process, not an entitlement for permanent employment. And so ultimately, we're gonna have to wait to see how all this plays out in court. But of course, the worry is right now is that in the meantime, a lot of damage is already being done. You know, as we talked about in that special Monday show yesterday, one of the biggest fears from these purges, whether they are legal or not, it's not what's the worst that can happen in day-to-day maintenance, though that is very obviously a concern. It's what happens when we come across any number of possible crises and we have agencies that are gutted. And then we'll get to more news in just a moment. But you know, if you're hiring for your business, you want the best people for the job, those with the right skills, experience, and passion. But you know, we all know finding those amazing candidates, it takes time and effort. But today's sponsor, ZipRecruiter, has you covered. Right? ZipRecruiter's technology excels at identifying the most qualified candidates for a wide range of roles. In fact, 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter find a quality candidate within the first day. And right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/DeFranco. And as far as what makes ZipRecruiter so effective, their technology scans resumes to pinpoint candidates whose skills and experience perfectly match your job description. Right? Meaning you don't have to sit through hundreds of irrelevant applications. You can get qualified candidates right away. And their powerful matching system shows you top candidates as soon as you post your job. And once you've got your list, you can easily invite your favorite applicants to apply, helping you fill the role faster. You deserve the best for your business, so hire the best with ZipRecruiter. And I mean, just remember, 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. So try it for free using our exclusive link, ZipRecruiter.com/DeFranco. That's ZipRecruiter.com/DeFranco. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. But then from that, let's move on to news that involves your 2 favorite things, Andrew Tate and this White House. Because apparently Andrew Tate has an ally in the White House. Because you have the Financial Times now reporting that the Trump administration is pressuring the Romanian government to lift its travel restrictions on the Tate brothers. Right in this, as the brothers are facing charges in both the UK and Romania for human trafficking, sexual misconduct, money laundering, operating an organized crime group, and rape. You know, while the investigation in Romania, where they live, unfolds, they've been banned from leaving the country. But apparently they saw a way out of their bind 5,000 miles away in Washington, D.C. Specifically in Elon Musk, who said he's not wrong in response to a post claiming that Andrew's bid to become Prime Minister of the UK will transform British politics and create an army of men demanding change. Because a couple of weeks ago, Tristan Tate seized on the alleged scandals the Doge team had supposedly exposed and wrote, "Wonder if any USAID went to Romania to fund any particular lawfare-based investigations." And in response to that, a user claimed to have uncovered a State Department document outlining goals to improve the rule of law and strengthen judicial institutions in Romania. But then, in response to that, Trump's special envoy Richard Grenell writing, "The USAID programs were weaponized weaponize against people and politicians who weren't woke. The Biden team spent U.S. taxpayer money to support left-wing programs and candidates around the world. And saying conservatives around the world were targeted, Romania is the latest example. And so last week, the Tate's case was reportedly brought up by U.S. officials in a phone call with the Romanian government. With then, sources telling the Times that Grenell revisited the issue with the Romanian foreign minister at a security conference in Munich, with that foreign minister then reportedly confirming to local media that the Tates' name had been brought up. But you also had Grenell